Okay. Hi, everyone. Hopefully we have some people filtering in. We'll just give it a couple of minutes as more people start to join. My name's Rafie, and this is Meera. We'll do proper intros in a moment, but we'll just wait for a few more to join. So we'll give it about 30 seconds or so, and we will begin, hopefully, an action-packed live stream webinar. How are you doing this morning, Meera?
I am well. I feel well, given that I had about a little bit of flu last week. I think something's going around, but I am recovering. And given this is about wellness, I've been dosing up
Nice.
all doTERRA, ginger, lemon, honey, all that kind of stuff. But I feel good now. It's a good week. How are you, Rafie?
Yeah, good, thanks. I was just at an event yesterday with the Startup Coalition for London Tech Week, and I have to say, I wasn't expecting too much. I was just popping over, and then turned out the Chancellor was there. So then next thing I know, I'm cordoned off at the end of a rooftop with the Chancellor taking pictures. I'm like, what have I ended up in? But
That's amazing. Well, this is like a really cool week for doing fun events, so that sounds great.
Exactly. And so this event is also hopefully part of all of your London Tech Weeks for the listeners who have tuned in. But we're going to make a start now. So yeah, big welcome to everyone who has joined and watching this live stream. This is an event unlike any other before, in my view, being in this industry for 7 years and Meera even longer than me. But we're going to cover topics like AI, the future of careers in law, what's going to happen to all our jobs, and also well-being, and maybe even go into the more esoteric topics of how to stay well in this industry. So let's start with intros. I will hand over to the wonderful Meera Patel and to give a bit of background into herself, and we'll go from there.
So thank you, Rafie, and hi to everyone. I feel super honoured to be on this, and it feels really incredible. Given Rafie, when you and I met in 2015, and I can tell the listeners a little bit about my career and that time when we met. So my name's Meera Patel. I'm the author of Get Into Law. I'm also a lawyer by background. I started my career a long time ago, qualified in 2013. And I had this very kind of traditional path. So law degree, LLM, LPC, and then I qualified at Latham & Watkins. And that was a really kind of, I guess, elite university, elite firm, and ticking those boxes very early on. And I'd say, I guess the real reason why I'm on the webinar, but also sharing the work that I'm doing, actually stems from when I first, started thinking about law, which was actually when I was a teenager in school. And when I was about, I don't know if you know this, Rafie, when I was about like 15 or 16, I was growing up in Croydon, and I would go to like the library near where I lived, Coulston Library. And I was obsessed with reading biographies, and I still am obsessed with reading biographies.
Very cool.
And the stories of people's lives. And I really found this really fascinating. To anyone who'd had this life that was impactful and successful in the world and was creating change, I was obsessed with it. And I probably read so many biographies, nearly probably everyone in that library section when I was a teenager. And the two that, I want to talk about were Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom and Bill Clinton's My Life. And when you look at some of the stories of these people, the foundation to that was law. The foundation to what they were doing was law. And they were becoming these people who were agents of change and empowering themselves, and then going into the world to influence positive impact in the world and create success. And for me, when I was this young girl, I remember reading these stories and thinking, this is what I want for my life. I want something that's going to give me this self-empowerment, allow me to go and influence change and be at the forefront of what's happening in society. And that was really why I then went into law in the first place. So that first bit of my career of just kind of going from school and qualifying as a lawyer was really me just doing that with such conviction. And I didn't really know that many lawyers. I didn't know that many female lawyers. But I just remember reading these stories and being like, this is the kind of person I want to be. And it's funny now that I've written a book, so many years later, effectively documenting this journey and documenting all of the lessons I learned for the next generation. So that was kind of the first bit of my career. And then after I qualified, I went into the Big Four. And so for the last decade, I've had my career within the Big Four. And there, first at EY and then at Deloitte. And I have built businesses, led teams, spoken to CEOs around the world, doing Brexit advice, legal entity restructuring, and now AI and digital regulation. And actually, it was then in 2015 when I first joined EY Law, I think around that time, Rafie, that you and I met. And I think you must have just been starting Genie at that point. And the reason I joined EY at that time was because what I saw was I wanted to be in this space that was entrepreneurial with law. I'd realized by that point, by the time I qualified, I wanted to create this entrepreneurial career. And what EY were doing at the time was building a practice that was client-facing advisory, but within this multidisciplinary context. And I still believe that this is true today, even more so given AI, because what clients want are solutions, not necessarily advice. And I saw that back then as a really young lawyer, and I saw that the model around consultancy/law, the model around multidisciplinary advice, and also kind of the trajectory of how the legal industry was changing in terms of innovative models. So that was really why I joined. And then I kind of had my career then for the next decade, really through the Big Four and still now today. And as I'm growing my career, I've really tried to be at the forefront of this kind of innovation and entrepreneurial side to how we think about law. And now, having published my book, Get Into Law, which is for the next generation, this is really about thinking, well, how is legal education shaping the future as well? And how is this playing into how we inspire and empower the next generation coming in, given everything that's going on? So that's a little bit about my career, and some little bits there about my life as well. And yeah, please tell me about your journey as well, because it's been a good journey also.
Yeah, no, appreciate that, and super interesting. I've got so many questions already, but for all the viewers listening in, we're going to be super candid on this call, try and be as honest as we can and give you guys as much insights as we can. Just diving into myself briefly, and then we'll hop onto more questions. So my name is Rafie. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Genie AI, and my background's kind of weird, I would say. I've been a lifelong programmer. I studied philosophy and economics at university, then joined the dark side and became a trader, a bond trader for a few years. Ended up managing a portfolio of £1 billion by the time I was 22, which was way too much responsibility, way too early. But got to trade through the European debt crisis with central banks around the world. I once sold 2.5 million bonds to the Vatican. Who knew the Vatican buys bonds of banks? But ultimately, I wanted to get back to having more of a positive impact, I would say, on society. So I started my first company, which is a social enterprise. Ended that company after a year, studied machine learning in my MSc degree. Was super lucky to learn that whilst Google DeepMind were just coming out of the UCL lab at that time. So we were taught by Google DeepMind. Wrote my thesis in generative AI 8 years ago. So it's been fascinating to see how far it's come. And since then, we built Genie AI, which now has over 150,000 companies using the product. looking forward to discussing more. And also for people watching, feel free to drop your questions in the chat and we will answer them as we go along. We'll make this as interactive as we can. But yeah, maybe I've got a question for you, Meera, right off the bat, if that's okay.
No, go for it.
I mean, your career is so interesting because it seems like you've always been at the forefront of change. You know, first going into corporate law at Latham's, but then quite early on moving to the Big Four.
Mm-hmm.
You could talk a bit
I
more.
mean, it was interesting because even when I went to Latham's, I mean, I must have been one of the first and early cohorts that they had when the US firms were first coming into London. That was at a time when Magic Circle firms were kind of, you know, what everyone wanted when you were in law school, I guess. And then the US law firms were coming in and they were this challenger. And even then I saw that as very attractive because it was this real entrepreneurial mindset that went behind that. And then when I moved to EY, that was such a big risk, I guess, and quite well, risk in a sense. I didn't go and start an AI company, Rafie, but I remember thinking that this is, you know, such a new model, and it's really, I really believed in that. Clients want outcomes, clients want solutions, and that's how you're providing value. I think if you now think about this concept, because that was a long time ago, you think about it now in the context of today and AI, I think AI has made it even more like necessary to provide value because AI has the content. So you have to be a lawyer who provides value, and where is that value going to come from? It has to be in the solution and how you're delivering it and the relationships and human connection and all of these things that I'm sure we'll talk about. But underpinning all of that was really the work that I'm passionate about when I share the work with my book is the personal growth aspect. Because for me to make those choices, I had to ask myself a lot of questions about myself and the world and where I wanted to be. And it's the kind of methodologies I encourage in the next generation also, how to find your unique success in the world of law, given how it's changing, but also given that you will have your own unique strengths. So yeah, I think that's, and how about you then? I guess when you were first starting Genie AI, you know, you kind of placed yourself in this. AI is such a buzzword now. You can't go anywhere without hearing about it. It's a London AI summit this week in tech, and it's, you know, everywhere. But when you were starting, what was that rationale going on in your mind?
Yeah, you know, I remember quitting on the trading floor, and it was a pretty big move because I was fortunate enough to be the second highest performer across the entire investment bank in trading. And so my immediate bosses were pretty mad at me for quitting, and, you know, escalated to my boss's boss's boss. And he took me into a room, and, you know, I'm happy to, I mean, I'll be honest, he borderline threatened me, saying things like, oh, you know, you're getting a bit older now. You might not be able to make it back into a career if you leave now in this industry.
How old were you?
Yeah, I was like 24 or something. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And also, you know, you guys know how these industries work. If I'd stayed just a few months longer, I would have earned my bonus, which would have been, you know, quite significant at that age. But I chose to not earn the bonus, to completely cut ties with the industry and take on 30 grand of debt instead to do an MSc in machine learning. And I think that's what I want to bring to the audience today here, which is when you are sort of at the forefront of innovation and change, you're going to be up against the tide. What I found in the last 7 years of Genie, and, you know, we also had, in a sense, the similar ideas to build something like ChatGPT in the early days, but I faced lots of resistance to doing that, and the reason was it was a bad idea at the time, for reasons we can go into. But, you know, when you're going up against change and you're trying to be at the front of things, you're always going to face resistance. I know many of our viewers are trying to input better processes, change the way things are done in their companies. And I'll just say, if you're facing resistance, that's a good sign. It means you are innovating. If everyone agrees with what you're doing, it's almost too obvious, and probably everyone else in the industry is already doing it as well. Yeah, what do you reckon about that, Meera?
I completely agree. And for me, the work with my book is really about personal development in the world of law, and I'm really trying to innovate in that space, in the legal education space. We've seen so much. I have done all of this personal development work for my whole career, Rafie. I've done like the Tony Robbins, and all of this kind of stuff. I'm also a certified yoga teacher, and I know you have that wellness side to you too. And to try and merge that world with the business world is what I'm aiming for in this brand. But actually, I believe that life success and business success are actually deeply connected, for me anyway. And being able to innovate in your life and in business is deeply connected. And so I 100% agree with you. The more I meet founders, the more I realize that you sort of have to be a little bit crazy and have this belief in your vision and what it is that you're trying to do. And it's difficult because there's this track that you came off. You came off this kind of finance track, and it's there and it's laid out for you, and there's so much, I guess, monetary reward there. But also, if you're trying to innovate and you're trying to create something in the world, you really have to be rooted in who you are and what you're doing. I actually think it's also a journey of yourself in the innovation journey. So, yeah, I think that is so true, Rafie. You're at the forefront of risk, and I remember even when I was advising on Brexit, in 2017, no one had really created these kind of Brexit consultancies. You sort of just have to take this risk and go with it. And for me, you've got to believe in what you're creating. I think that's, I 100% agree.
Yeah, well said. We've got a question for you, Meera, from the audience. And we'll take questions as we go just to make it dynamic. But
that's cool. Hey, Shade Hanif. Hopefully I pronounced that right. I'm sorry if I haven't.
Maybe I can read it out for you if that works. So while in the Big Four, how would you say AI has transformed? Do you think it encouraged knowledge sharing?
Well, so the first thing I'd say is that we're doing this webinar completely just disclaim on our personal bases, not from our company bases. So from my personal view, would I say AI is transforming? This is such a fascinating question. I'd love to get into this actually with you as well, Rafie. So thank you for this question. What is so interesting is that the whole of law and legal is based on content and knowledge. So what is in your head? And previously, as lawyers, you're always paid for your knowledge in your head. You're basically advising based on content that you have and based on the knowledge that you have in your head. And now with AI, all of this content is outside of you. It sits outside of your head. So the content is all here. And whether that's, reams of cases, for example, that previously you'd have to rote learn, or, clauses within contracts, for example, all of it's outside. I think it will transform knowledge departments, to answer your specific question, because the content now is sitting outside, and also you're able to use, LLMs and all of these things. Do I think that's happening at pace right now? No, because I think, funnily enough, also as lawyers and as people, we now have this new role around what's ethical. How can we do this? How can we actually, use this knowledge that we have in a safe and trustworthy way? I think there's still these questions that are being answered. And I think there's also going to be an adoption timeframe for when people will start adopting this new methodology and coming to terms with the fact that all of this content is now outside of us. So I think it will hugely transform in the future. That's for definite, because we see the power of it. You can see the power of it with tools like Perplexity and ChatGPT and Genie AI. You can see the total power of what it does. And I think we now have to understand how we engage with it. So for me, I think the lawyer of the future, I guess, isn't the one who has all the knowledge. It's the one who can interact with this knowledge that's already there and use their judgment to interact with it in the best way. And that really goes back to all of the skills for the next generation. Well, what's your skill? I remember when I was at law school, Rafie, perhaps you're fortunate that you didn't have to rote learn cases at law school, but I remember just reading all of these cases and memorizing them, and you'd have to memorize 100 cases and then go sit an exam. And I just think now you've got all of these AI tools, and all of that will be, apart from hallucinations and making sure that, you've got right case law, but all of that is outside of you. So now what's your skill? Your skill is judgment and assessment and, identifying the bits that are correct and asking the right questions. So it's a completely different way, I think, of learning. And I think the legal education market is going to have to keep pace with this and the modern realities of the world. I think that's the next challenge that's coming. And also for the next generation of lawyers. So yeah, I think it will transform. Will it happen tomorrow? Probably not. I do think it will happen. And when it happens, the skill set that we need to interact is going to be this one of, judgment and identification more so. I mean, what do you think of that, Rafie? What's your view?
Yeah, it's really interesting and well said. The price of knowledge is going to zero, which is a scary thing to say. I was walking back from the Startup Coalition event yesterday, and this founder was telling me about his new idea in photonics and things like that. And I just said to him, Tom, it sounds really smart, but there's less value to being smart in the future. And that's crazy to hear for a society that's built on a type of intelligence that is based on fact stuffing. So we need to move away from fact stuffing to a more dynamic form of intelligence where we are on the one side very human, connecting with people, using our emotional skills, our creative skills, our inspirational skills. On the other side, being managers of AI. So what I would bring to the audience is consider the roles and job titles of the future, because the jobs of tomorrow don't even exist in the job titles of today. And we're already thinking of potential new roles at Genie around AI automation specialists or AI operation automation integrators, legal engineering and legal AI.
An automation integrator, I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, we're assigning these big words to things right now because we haven't got succinct names for them yet. But in law, for example, we believe in this idea of a risk relationship manager.
Yeah.
So
that was fun.
What is a risk relationship? Yeah, apologies for that. So a risk relationship manager is this new title we've coined where there will be the lawyer in a business that manages how the AI agents operate automatically. So they'll set the rules, the parameters, the playbooks. So you have these new job titles even for lawyers, and part of what Genie is doing is giving lawyers a new path into the future. What do you reckon?
No, this is so fascinating, and I completely agree. And it kind of goes back to that earlier point I mentioned about AI and how we have this role as lawyers to come in and build these frameworks and build these new ways of interacting. And I think otherwise, it's it's really leveraging who we are. I completely agree. I think building the frameworks, building the guardrails, building the management processes around it are all jobs of the future. And my personal view is that these kind of compliance roles are going to be huge. They will form quite a huge part of the future within the legal profession and dynamically change the type of role. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I think AI compliance. I guess the fear from everyone is that AI takes most of our jobs, and there's the argument some people are saying, which is like, okay, it's not AI that's going to replace your job, but the person that uses AI better than you that was going to replace your job. But it might well be that more jobs are created once again. It might just be that we need a whole host of new jobs to manage, integrate, operate the AI. And
I think we do. I think we
Yeah.
do. You look at all the legislation that's coming out in relation to it, and we're still at the brink. We're very nascent in terms of AI regulation and the laws that are coming around it. So who's going to create these laws? I think that's really exciting. Who's going to talk about the ethics behind it and build the frameworks and the guardrails and the compliance processes? I think there's so much there. And tech companies are being created all the time, and they're going to need support. So I think this totally has to be the future. And I think I don't know if you've heard this, but I often get asked this question of, Meera, you've written this book, it's about being the next generation, become lawyers, but don't you think AI is going to totally take all the junior legal roles and there's going to be no junior legal roles because of AI, because of, I don't know if you've heard of this, but I hear it all the time. And I think that it's really interesting because my personal view is that AI will automate process. I mean, the whole point of AI really is to automate and to provide efficiency and productivity, and that's what it's doing for some of these kind of junior tasks. I agree. But what does that mean for the human and the person? Well, it means that we're going to redefine what it means to be a junior lawyer. And I think junior lawyers will now become more like strategic assets than what we were used to in the past. And when AI is giving you effectively productivity and taking away the time that you would have spent on something routine, for example, well, now you have this time to invest in another skill set, the skill set of your own strategic investment, your own personal growth, human connection, influence, empathy, judgment, how to manage the AI in the first place, all of these other skills. And I think those are the skills that will become more valuable. And it's funny, you still need to know the content and you still need to have the knowledge. That's the funny thing. But just in a different way. So you can't get lazy about the content. You can't really be like, I can just, rely on a model. It'll just tell me. You can't get so lazy in that way. You still have to have the perception, I believe. But then you have to invest in these other skills. So, yes.
Yeah. Well said. I like the idea that knowledge is changing and the way we think about it is changing. We have a question here from Martin Boyle.
Okay, exciting.
Yeah, so he's saying within the next 3 years, this is a quote from Mark Cuban, there will be so much AI, in particular AI video, people won't know if what they see or hear is real, which will lead to an explosion in face-to-face engagement, events, and jobs. What do you reckon?
Why don't you go first on this one? I think this is a really great question. Thank you, Martin.
Oh, are you passing this over to me? Yeah, sure. And by the way, hi, Martin. I think we know each other from various events, so love to see you here. Yes, I actually do agree with this. I think we're already seeing it. On the one hand, we're seeing this massive growth of AI, but in parallel, there's this big other buzzword, which is community. There's a loneliness crisis, I think, in London and possibly even globally. The more we're plugging into smart sunglasses, VR, AI, the more we're plugging out of human connection. So I think we're already seeing this. It will mean we're much more intentional. So, for example, at Genie, we're remote first, but we very intentionally meet up at least once a week. Even last week, myself and some of our team actually met up in a spa in a in a swimming pool, and we discussed team structure. So, and then we were talking about target market refinement the week after at the top of the shard. And so you see, we're using these locations to give us inspiration to make progress along very specific topics. And that's currently what we're seeing. It's like using the physical very intentionally. Yeah, what do you reckon, Meera? Where do you see face-to-face?
I think the fact that community is now even bigger, I think is so true, that you'll have these pockets of people who are together. And I agree that the face-to-face engagement will be key, Martin, because people aren't going into the office, for example, every day anymore. People are working fully remote jobs. And I think connection and authenticity also will become key, because, as you say, we won't know what's real. And we're also seeing the rise of fake news, for example. So we don't know what's real in the news anymore. And if these videos keep getting created where, for example, even the modeling industry, it's a completely different industry, but hugely under pressure because of AI models, for example. So all of these industries will definitely need because the way in which we interact, the way in which we sell, for example, if I think about the kind of work that I've been in and, the sales of services, for example, that is such a human connection, energy exchange almost. And I think it will become really, really important. So we'll probably end up seeing, and I believe, maybe we're seeing that already today, is that people will work remotely and maybe there'll be a lot of tech involved, but then there'll be big kind of events that you'll attend alongside that, instead of that kind of every day, maybe seeing a few people by the water cooler or something like that, which, doesn't really happen anymore. So I think for sure, people are searching for authenticity, human connection, community. These things will become premium in the world we're in today. And I agree, Martin. But whether it will happen within the next 3 years, what do you think of that, Rafie? Because that's quite specific there. 3 years, that's quite quick.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm kind of seeing a little bit.
Yeah, to be honest, I think it's already happening. What I would say, if I'm going to be controversial and provide a sort of different view to things, is I think we'll see a world of multiplicity. And what I mean by that is chess is the canonical example. So AI beat the top chess player in the world, something like 10, 15 years ago. So before this current boom in Gen AI. And so people wondered, okay, is this the end of chess? Like, what's the point in playing now? But actually, it increased the popularity of chess, not decreased it. And we'll see the same, in my opinion, in all the creative arts. So things like music creation. You'll have much more AI artists. You'll have VR artists on stage, as you already have with the ABBA band. And people will love the AI artists, but they will also still love the human artists. So we'll see a big explosion in greater volumes and variety of art. With regards to commerce, I think what we're seeing so far is there's a difference between the consumer, SMB, and enterprise cross sections. So in consumer, it's becoming very like complete AI. So there are a number of big companies that have grown rapidly in the last few years, offering, for example, personalized AI fitness agents that give you feedback on your daily exercise routine and stuff like that. Another one, I met the founder a few weeks ago in SF, called Speak AI, and they help you learn languages through AI agents. I think they're making around 20 million ARR right now. So at the consumer side, it's very automated. But on the enterprise side, we're seeing you still need humans to sell things, to talk to, because contract sizes are much larger, risk is much larger. So enterprise is going to be slow to follow. And I do worry about that. I'm not sure about you, Meera, but I do worry about bigger companies, and you've worked in enough bigger companies to know about the pace of change. What's your views on that?
I think it's really interesting, right? Because imagine, when we had like the .com bubble in 2000, and everyone was like, oh my God, like everything's going to change and it's all going to be dramatic. But yes, we can have this new thing that comes in and it changes. But I think then you look at the rate of adoption. What was really the rate of adoption? Did everything really change within 2 years, within that moment when we had, the online and the .com bubble? It took quite a while. And I think this is going to be the really interesting thing with AI, is that what's the rate of adoption? Are we going to go on this exponential curve, which is quite a scary curve to go on, because when we were talking about kind of ethics and guardrails and frameworks and, balancing innovation with protecting society almost, that's a real big exponential curve. Or are we going to go on less of a curve and more of a kind of a gradual pace of adoption? Or are we going to plateau at some point? What I see it, I'm trying to draw a graph, but I see these kind of different spokes coming off the graph in terms of the rate of adoption. And however quick or exponential that will be will determine how these big companies have to adapt. I mean, the ones that are going to adapt the quicker, the banks probably, because they've always been at the forefront of change. The banks, they've also got the money to invest, and they'll be investing for reasons like productivity probably, and process more than anything, and optimizing returns. That's what big companies are doing. What I think is really interesting when I talk to so many of my friends in companies is that you bring in an AI system, like a super fancy AI system, and it's here, and you've invested in the tech, and it's there, and it's being rolled out across the company. Well, one, are your people even literate on this? Have you gone through and done AI literacy training to make sure they understand how to use it? And two, there are still some people in this company who are still trying to figure out the legacy system that was brought in before the AI system. And they're still kind of stuck on that. And so what will happen is you don't see what the company wants, which is the ROI on investing in that tech in the first place. And so the real thing is, well, how do we bring in this AI system and get ROI on it? How do we make sure that our people get the most out of it? And if we're going to adopt it, because the world is moving at this exponential growth curve, or whatever we believe the growth curve right now is, because that's subject to anyone's view, let's make sure that we're using it properly, not because it's a thing to do. And so, yeah, I think that's what I'm seeing. It's sort of that race to adopt, but also the race to get a return. So, and the way to do that is to make sure that people are literate and people are using it in the most optimized way, and in a way that's also safe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. We have a lot of we provide our clients with prompt engineering training.
Okay.
Sure, they're prompting correctly, because it does make a difference what you input into the AI in terms of what you get out. Yeah, I want to take.
Well, that's also something I'm seeing, Rafie, is the data quality input. So before you bring in an AI system, you've got to put data into the system. So whatever your output is, it's only as good as the data you put in. And if your data is still hanging about from COVID times or pre-COVID times, then the data needs to be completely refreshed before you can get the system output that you actually need. I don't know what you think about this, but I think there is this very pre-basic process around data refresh that has to happen also. And I think that's a really interesting point as well to consider when bringing in new systems.
Yeah, absolutely. With regards to training, in the past, you'd have to train all models from scratch about 5 years ago. And that's why AI systems just weren't delivering the ROI to companies. Now, as we all know, we can use these big foundation models like Anthropic, Gemini, GPT, which are trained on pretty much the entire body of human consciousness, at least that which is public. Hence why, by the way, if you have private data sets, they're still very valuable. But techniques used now, you can fine tune, so you can retrain these models to your specific needs. But more commonly, we're seeing people use what's called RAG, which stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation, where you're not actually training the model, but just when you're using it, you prompt it to retrieve from data sources that you may already have.
Right.
And that's where your company data sets can be still really valuable. So yes, I see in future people have sort of stores of private valuable data. They have tools for the model to use. And then these AI agents just going to do pretty much everything in between as far as execution goes.
That kind of goes back to that earlier question on knowledge management. That's a fascinating model for knowledge management. I haven't seen it in practice, but I agree. I think it's the future.
Yeah. We have this question from Lord Roberts, a bit of a change of topic, but still interesting.
Hi, Lord Roberts.
Hello. Do you believe AI will replace corrupt judges who oftentimes abuse the due process of law? Very interesting. Wow.
So as an AI machine or a system replacing a judge's decision or a process, I think it's the same here as in the professional services industry, is that we will have AI alongside processes and legal processes. I think in that particular scenario, there will be a person involved. Will AI replace it completely? I think this is a really, really interesting question. Because if you think about I'm not a barrister, but I have friends who work, in the court system, and we know that there's this huge backlog of cases and case law and cases coming through the system, and there is technology that is coming in to try and reduce that burden. So if the technology that's coming in is trying to reduce this burden, can the same technology also, I guess in the question, replace corrupt judges? Basically, what that could do is a process to try and reduce poor process or reduce corruption. Can this system also alleviate this problem at the same time? Possibly, and yes. But I do still think that there will be humans involved in this because it's a judicial process. But whether we need as many and whether we need humans involved in the entire process, I think, and this is my personal view, will reduce. Because if we can use AI to resolve some of these problems, like reducing corruption, reducing the burden of cases that are going through the system, basically giving people more access to justice and quicker access to justice. I think if we can use AI to do that, yes. Who oftentimes abuse the due process of the law. It's really about holding people to account. Can AI hold people to account? Do we want a system to hold other people to account? I think that's a really, difficult challenge. I think at the moment we're in the phase where AI can support a process and support other humans. but will it replace humans entirely in that process? I'm not sure we're there yet. I'm not sure we're quite there yet. What do you think, Rafie?
Yeah, so I like to give people frameworks, and then you can use that framework to extrapolate into the future. And the framework here that I think is useful is to think about two dimensions. One is risk, and second is averaging. Now, what do I mean? I've just said some strange words. So what you're really asking is, will AI replace decision making, and specifically in courts? So you've got high risk and low risk decisions. And what we're seeing now, as Meera, you mentioned, AI is replacing low risk decisions, humans are doing high risk decisions. That's today. What will happen in the future when AIs are perfectly smart? I do think they'll replace high risk decisions too. So then let's look at the second dimension and what I mean by averages. Now, AI is really good at making the best average decision. It's going to take the entire body of knowledge and give you a general average decision. And that's probably actually a good thing for the law, because the law, you don't want to interpret too much. You want to do what's sort of generally averagely right. But where you want non-average decision-making, inspirational decision-making, for example, if you're creating a company and you have to think of the next big idea that no one else has thought before, then AI is not actually a good use case, even in the future, I would say. So I actually do think judges will be replaced by AI doing the best average decision. But I think human progress, evolution, innovation, there'll still be a place for humans there.
I think in that process also we have to think about bias. I think this is a huge risk. So even in that process, if you've got AI in Rafie's world of replacing a high risk decision, who is in place to ensure that we are not, it will have to be trained on biases, presumably, because this is the worst thing. You don't want a judicial system that is inherently biased. And, we've seen all of this stuff from ChatGPT coming out as creating biased answers, for example, and all of these things. So one of the things I believe, especially in law, is that we want people to have access to fair justice. And so if AI can reduce corruption and also reduce bias, then that would be a really fascinating place to be able to train these models to sit alongside the system in that decision-making process. I think this is a really fascinating question. Thank you.
Yeah, and the good news I'll say on the bias point is that I think that's probably the most solvable of all the AI problems. We will train AI to be less biased than humans. Of course, every bias is some form of bias, and who's deciding what is the correct level of bias? And you need diverse groups coming together to decide these things. But yeah, I think of all the AI problems, that one is solvable. As a sort of brief side note, I'm more worried about the impact on the environment, energy costs and usage. But equally, I think there are discontinuous innovations in energy, such as nuclear fusion, energy from hydrogen deposits in the earth. So yeah, brief tangent there, but I think those are some of the themes happening. We've got a couple of other really interesting things. Yeah. So maybe because Shade has asked the questions already, I'll go first to Victoria and then come back to Shade. So Victoria Burnett, how do you think universities can support students entering a different legal world? I think one for you, Meera.
I think this is such a fascinating question. One where AI is not something to be scared. That's interesting. I think universities have to support students to make sure it's not something students rely on, but learn to utilise to their advantage and be prepared to use it in their roles as junior solicitors. This is such a great question, Victoria. Well, one, the whole idea of being scared. This is really goes deep into my work around, personal development and growth. And I think approaching things with, knowing that you're not going to know anything, and also just coming into it with this kind of confident approach. And curiosity, I think, is such a great skill for the next generation to have and be part of what's happening in the innovation. So approaching with curiosity, and then really understanding what's happening in the legal world. So I think, Rafie's company is an excellent example of the intersection of law and AI. And there is so much going on in that space. I think having an awareness, especially as, someone coming into the profession, is necessary. But also this is so exciting because it means that you can shape the future. And Rafie just mentioned all of these new roles that are being created. And I think it's really exciting to be able to almost brainstorm what these roles are. And if I think about my own career, I remember when I was starting out, people who were doing data, and GDPR had just come in play. Anyone who just trained in data and learned about data, gosh, their career just skyrocketed within about 5 or 6 years. And even when I was doing Brexit, for example, no one really knew about Brexit. And I just sort of learned about it and became very curious about it. And very quickly, I was able to scale my career. So I say to anyone who is looking at this with kind of maybe a nervous approach, be curious, but also realize that all of these new roles are being created and you can be part of that. But you can also be part of shaping the future because you're primed to shape the future because you're in it from the beginning. And I think having that approach is super important and has to be done alongside, as you start to build. And it will play into legal education for sure, because the education has to start, as I said earlier, reflecting the modern realities of what is happening in the profession. So being curious and also leading into that, for me, I think is really important.
Super useful. I'm sure that's going to be a really valuable answer to many of the viewers on the call. And I think Shaday's question was actually very similar in terms of junior lawyers. So I might, since we only have 8 minutes left, Meera, I might switch topic a bit to the last words in this title, which is wellness.
Yeah.
A topic very dear to both of our hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll hand over to you. What do you think is the place of wellness in legal and legal AI?
Wow. So in the work that I'm doing, I truly believe that wellness is a power move. I think a lot of times lawyers come to wellness as this antidote to burnout after kind of doing a big M&A deal or working really long hours, and you're like, oh God, wellness. For me, I think building that wellness toolkit alongside your technical and professional toolkit is so important. It's something I've tried to do in my own life. I probably did it unawares, but I did it because I realized I needed it for my own self. And I didn't realize until later that there's just this whole world out there of wellness tools and methodologies and things that can really elevate you in life, but also in business. So for me, I mean, that really came to a head when I did my yoga teacher training in 2022. I kind of really went deep into learning about all of this stuff. But I'd always use meditation and mindfulness throughout my career. I think for anyone who's in law, it's such an ambitious type A, often fast-paced, quite, competitive type profession. So I think wellness is needed more than ever. Excitingly, I held an event at the Professional Legal Institute, which we're holding again for anyone who's interested. And this event was actually a networking event about human connection. And I collaborated with the sound nutritionist, and we brought in sound frequencies to elevate confidence and to bring people into that kind of state of mindfulness. And even in the beginning, what was so exciting was we put on ocean waves. And for anyone who hasn't kind of listened to ocean waves before, just as a meditative practice, and my friend taught me this actually, is that the sound of the ocean wave replicates the frequency of the resting heart. And so when you are connecting to that frequency, this is why you feel very relaxed when you're listening to waves or you're by the sea, for example. And so why do I say all these things? And Rafie, you probably have so much to say on this, is that you can utilize this all as your own personal toolkit as you go through your kind of legal career and life. So for me, it's just as important as any other skill and should be part of that toolkit for the future, especially one now that we've just talked about that is going to value even more human connection, authenticity. And I think it was Pharrell who said that, I listened to something he said, he was like, it's not about the AI race, it's about the human race. I really love that. So yes, what do you think? And totally share more about your journey.
That's such a brilliant phrase. It's not the AI race, it's the human race. But yeah, I really like what you said, Meera, about not just tacking on or bolting on wellness at the end of a big deal or something. But I'm really passionate about wellness, not as a sort of solution to a problem, but actually wellness is a core sort of way to excel in life and career. So we think of health as like on a scale of 0 to 100%. It's like, oh, I'm only 80% today. I'm only 70%. But I think of health of like, how do I get to 150%? What does 190% look like? What does 500% look like? And like yourself, Meera, being into these topics for a long time, I've been meditating pretty much since I was 10 or 11 years old as a bit of a strange child.
That's great.
Yeah, I've been studying all these topics around yoga, qigong, Egyptian methods, meditating in various sacred sites around the world, be it with the Moai statues in Easter Island or even in Jerusalem. And my view is this is actually the future of humanity. We're still learning how to operate our bodies and how to unlock the organic potential of our bodily wisdom. And that's not something that is a job for AI. So I think as AI becomes supremely intelligent in one direction, it will teach us what it means to be human in another direction.
And that is such a powerful way to perhaps conclude this, in terms of that last phrase. AI will teach us what it means to be human. I completely agree, Rafie. And wellness will become even more important in a way that's not just a recovery tool, but as a high performance, like you said, go from 100 to 150 and enhance everything type of tool. Especially as we live longer. I think it's so true.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Meera. This has been such a fun conversation. I think we can chat for way longer if we had time. But just to finish off, where can people find out more about you before we close, or any other events you're holding? Or
yes, of course. So you can find more about me by following me on LinkedIn, Meera Patel. Get Into Law is available on Amazon, on Kindle and Audible. My website, Meera Patel. And I have an event coming up at the Professional Legal Institute, but also at lots of other law schools, law firms. So if you are a firm, a law school, please do get in touch, and I'd love to share more. Thanks, Rafie.
And just to also add, if you want to hear more about myself or Genie, if you sign up to genieai.co on the website, you'll be on our mailing list. And I'm also running a wellness spiritual yoga event end of July. If you go to rafiefaruq.com, you will see the event, which is also on Eventbrite. And we're going to go in deep into wellness and advanced living. But
this is great. This is super great. We have to collaborate on an event, Rafie.
yes, we do. But for now, thank you so much to all the listeners. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got some value out of it. And we really, really wish you the very best of the day and London Tech Week as well.
Have a great week.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.